Welcome to the Middle Ages, a podcast hosted by two women in midlife navigating the wild, liberating, and often hilarious realities of this chapter of life. With a mix of insight, irreverence, and real talk, they explore everything from changing bodies and shifting identities to evolving relationships, work, and purpose. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's a whole new beginning.
We did it!
Hey, hi, Steph.
Hi, we made it. We finally did it. Diana and I have been talking about doing this for a very long time based on all the conversations that we have, all of the meanderings of our lives. And we are so excited for you to be joining us. And welcome. How are you feeling, Diana?
I'm excited. I'm going to tune into my body. I'm feeling like fluttery and tingly and all the good feels. I'm happy to be here with you, Steph. I think there's nobody else I'd want to do. No, let me be clear. There's nobody else I want to do this with. And I am happy that hopefully we will bring some service to our audience, have lots of laughs, take what we do on the dance floor, bring it here, and really show people the vibrancy and the aliveness that's here and available to them in the Middle Ages.
Yeah. And this was sort of the inspiration for this show and putting it all together is that Diana and I have conversations all the time and around our lives and the stage of our lives. And one of the things that we were talking about a few months ago was like, I just turned 50, Diana just turned 60, and neither of us look 50 or 60, by the way. But what has become really, really sort of evident is like, this feels like a whole new trajectory. This feels like a whole new phase. And I'm just loving it. Like, I just really am feeling into it. And there's this narrative that our cultural society has, is that when women turn 40, 50, they start to lose value. Like, there's nothing left there, for anything. And women adopt that narrative too. But I just want, through this show, for all of the women in our age group to understand that this can be exciting. This is something that can give us new life. And this is a stage in our lives where we can start trying things that we haven't tried before. We can move into it with enthusiasm, with joy, which doesn't mean that there hasn't been shit, right? It doesn't mean that there hasn't been things that we have contended with, but I think that's all part of the story, isn't it?
It is. And, I have to say, sorry about that little glitch. Here's us being perfectly imperfect. I was like, okay, should I go on Facebook and just ask people to let us know they're listening? Because I see there's views on there. That's like, oh no, did you hear that sound? It was like Facebook started talking. So we started getting feedback. My 50s were very different. I was in a very different phase of my life in my 50s. I was just coming out of severe business and financial trauma. So I didn't have the same appreciation for my 50s as I do for my 60s. I still had a lot of the same practices I have now, but I really can recognize that in my 50s, I was in survival mode. I was in fight flight. I was just trying to get food on the table. I was just trying to figure out what to do business-wise, how to support my family. And in the 60s, I feel very, very different. I've let go of a lot of worry. And I always say, turn your worry to wonder. I've let go of that. I am very trusting. I am having so much fun. And just a couple of weeks ago, Steph and I go dancing. For those of you that don't know us, we have live music at the top of a mountain every Friday night in this little mountain town we live in that I'll just mention. We live in Squamish, and it's where the ocean meets the mountains. It's a beautiful west area of Canada. And we go dancing. And one of Steph's friends asked me, or we were talking about how long I've been enjoying life like this, because there's no doubt when you see Steph and I dancing, we are enjoying life. We are fully in our freedom and our joy and our full on vibrancy experience. And I said, it's fairly recent. And he said, why? And I said, well, I was raising my kids. I was building my businesses. I was in a relationship. I had some immense downfalls and traumas and was navigating those. And it just feels like at this point, like those things have peeled away. And I can be fully, unapologetically, completely in my ecstasy of being 60 and feel really good about it.
There's this whole concept of not giving a fuck, right?
Mm,
And so, you hear this a lot that women in their 50s say they don't give a fuck anymore. And it sounds a bit glib, and I
mhm,
think that what it's interpreted as is that I'm deciding not to give a fuck, but there's actually this whole thing that happens, and this is what I'm starting to really experience, is that there's this whole thing that happens that's maybe a little less severe than that, but it's like all of the nothing matters anymore. All the things that seemed to matter or seemed to worry me before just sort of kind of went, you get this perspective. So I'm 10 years behind you, and my kids are now teenagers, and, my daughter is gonna graduate next year. And there's an element of it where the kids start to just step into their own almost adulthood. And
mhm,
that is a really sort of freeing part of this. But I think it's so much more than that. I think it's this perspective getting. And I know that I used to spend so much time worrying about, like, not so much like how do I look, but how do I appear, and how do I
yeah,
have to do everything perfectly? I have to do everything as good as it, and I have to show up in this way. And it just seems to have melted away to the
mm,
point where it's like, hey, this is what you get, right? This is who I am. I have a lot of value, and I don't really know, like, what I'd be curious to dive into is what changed? Like,
mm,
what did change? It wasn't necessarily, and I've done a lot of work in the last few years, but it wasn't necessarily that I was forcing myself to get into a mindset where I let go of things, because I think my mind is much more inclined to hang on to things because it's protection. I've had to be a protector, I've had to be a provider, I've had to be all these things for so long. So, what is it, in your opinion, that just allows us to sort of step into this place where it's like, it's not like there isn't anything to worry about. It's not like there aren't challenges. It's not like things are all just rainbows and butterflies, but that liberation of the heaviness of everything just
mhm.
sort of, it's so wonderful.
Well, I will first of all say, because you know me, my friend, I am a spiritual warrior and spiritual practitioner and teacher and coach. So I believe in rainbows and butterflies. And it just made me remember, like, what I was going to talk about. One of the catalysts for the changes for me is having the courage at 55 to pack up my life and move across Canada with a teenage son. And like, I get goosebumps when I even think about it and talk about it, because for me, that showed me who I am. That showed me who I've always been, and I didn't really know it, and I didn't really believe it, and I did it. And that was a big change maker for me, a big change marker for me. And I'm just speaking of rainbows, like when I drove from Toronto to British Columbia, Canada, which is like basically across Canada. And when I drove into this province of British Columbia, the very first thing that I saw when I crossed the border into this province was a double rainbow. And I literally looked up and said, like, I know I'm in the right place. And it took me a full year to really feel that, because it was fucking hard to move here as an older, like a middle-aged person without a partner, without friends. It was really, really hard. And I did it. And so every time I do these things, every time I make a decision and I follow through with it, and I recognize that courage is inside here, courage isn't something I have to grasp for, it reaffirms my worth. It reaffirms my purpose. It reaffirms that I am so needing to be here and meaning to be here. But I want to add one thing, and I want to add one thing. For me, here's where Steph and I, we're going to have some great banter as we go through these conversations, because for me, it's about getting out of my mind and getting into my body, and not always listening to the mind. The mind is so fucking tricky. We have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and as silly humans, we believe them. And that is a problem in our society. It's a real big epidemic in our society. So I have learned, and this has been for me a 20-year practice, but really, really coming deeply into it in the last 5 years, to be in my body, to notice the thoughts I have, to challenge the thoughts I have if they don't feel good in my body, and then continue. It's not always going to feel good. And there's nothing about this age that we're in, these middle ages. It's not always going to feel good. We'll talk about this over the weeks and months, but we have health things come up for a lot of people. That's very real. And yet I don't get caught up in the mind of it. I listen to my body, I take my breaths, and then I really have set the intention. I'm going to friggin' have fun for the next, like, the next phase of my life. And you and I both have said this, Steph, in our various posts, that this is not the ending. This is like the magical, beautiful beginning of a new era. And I think we're both really good examples of that.
I think what you'll learn if you guys hang out with us longer, you'll learn that Diana and I are like kind of the odd couple, right? Like they were in a sense, you would meet us and you'd be like, you guys are so different, because I'm so rooted in the logical and the analytical and the practical, but I also have a strongly developed spiritual side in my own brand of spirituality. But I wear that on the inside, and my logical, humorous, like, analytical self is usually on the outside. Diana's the opposite. She's got both, but she leaves her spirituality is on the outside. But the two of us, and we find humor in it, right? Like we can totally tease each other, but knowing there's a base level of respect. And I think that this sort of speaks to one of the really important things of our age too, is women build community, and women exist in community, and women thrive in community. And what we've just been through for the last 30 years of our lives is what almost feels like survival, right? And if you've had kids, it's been all about what's happening with your kids and where are they getting to? And all of a sudden you're sitting here and you're going,
getting them to activities, doing all that, having dinner in the cars, like we've all done it. And some people listening are still doing it because, like you, Steph, they could be 50 and still have children at home and have that responsibility. So yeah, go
but
on.
that's also a little bit of privilege, because we're now entering into this time where we start to see. So I think this is a really important topic, and maybe we dive into this, but I think there's a point that all of a sudden we go, wait a second, I have time now. Like there's some time starting to emerge, and what do I do with that? And I've lost this sense of myself and this sense of identity and who I am. And that's confronting. And so people will either take that and they'll be like, existential crisis, and I don't know what to do with myself, and I don't know who I am, and I get lost. Or they take that and they say, amazing, I'm going to get to know myself again. And I think that that's some kind of the journey you and I have both been on. And I know certainly in the last year and a half, due to several things, that's really been the journey that I've been on, is learning to calm down and learning to just sit for a minute and say, this is my choice now, and I have options now, and I have this space and time. Like I don't even see my kids anymore. My daughter drives now, so she's all over the place, and my son is working and what have you. So all of a sudden there's this space, and the space can be really confronting, right?
I know what to do with that space, Steph.
Oh, I know you do.
Fill it with pickleball.
Oh my God.
I know, I'm addicted to pickleball. If anybody listens, plays, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, so just to give you some context, my daughter is she's just turned 28. She's married. She lives on her own, not far from me. And my son is almost 19, and he's actually moving away to university in next week. And I'm actually not sure how I'm going to experience that space, like to be continued, right? Like in 2 weeks, I'll give you an update, because I have not lived alone in 42 years. And some of you listening might not have even been born 42 years ago. That's how long I've been either in partnership, relationship, parenting, and now I'm going to be completely alone. Like it's going to be me and my dog, and I'm going to be projecting everything onto her. She better take it. And yet there's a part of me that I feel very content. I feel very on purpose with work, very fulfilled with work. I feel I have beautiful relationships. You mentioned community. And I think that's one of the number one important things for health and wellness for women in the Middle Ages, is to taking that perspective and that lens from family, which is where we of course had to be and can continue to be, and then transitioning to, where's my community? What do I love to do? And how can I find people that love to share that? Like Steph and I share dancing every chance we get. That's our thing, dancing and eating meals. And I have other people like it's pickleball, and I have other people it's yoga, and I have other people it's hiking. And so, what do you love to do? And this is what I had to figure out. What do I love to do when I am taken out of the role of parent and partner and possibly even work? Although both of us are still working, some of you listening may not be working anymore, and that's possibly a different trajectory for you, but we are both still working and planning on working for a while. So looking at what are the things that I love to do and where are my people? And I did ask my community staff, you and I chatted last week, and I asked them, what is my superpower? And the message that kept coming back for me was building community. And I know that. I've done that for 20 years. I've done it even longer. I continue to do it. And so I do it because it's what fills me up. It's because I need community. So I find and build community. That's sort of one of my gifts. And it's my community that's really going to hold me up when I have moments in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure, of feeling really sad, really lost, really alone. I will be reaching out to my community. So I do think that was a really important point that you brought up, that this is a time in our lives where we get to create our community.
And I think, riffing on that same point is, I keep thinking about the women that are getting to this place where they do have this kind of existential, where it all of a sudden just sort of hits them in the face. And they're like, who am I? What am I doing? And coming back to that superpower idea, and purpose, right? We talked about purpose and putting those two things together. If we follow the sort of the thread, and I did the same thing, I asked a whole bunch of people who know me well, and I said, what is my superpower? Like, what do I do well? And for them, it was all about leadership and being able to create clarity around things that are messy and chaotic, and I can get down to the heart of that really quickly. And when I think about purpose and I think about how badly I am driven to help other women at whatever age become better versions of themselves and become successful in owning their own futures. And I work with middle-aged women, I work with younger women in a business capacity, and that's how I deliver on my purpose, is that I like, even just having a conversation with my next door neighbor who just turned 29 last night. She stopped by. We had this really great conversation about relationships. And then she walked away and she says, I need to spend more time with you. And I'm like, that's what we need. We need those intergenerational relationships to like bring that wisdom along. And that's not to say I know everything, like, God, not even close. But that's my purpose. And when we can get aligned with purpose, I do this for my work. And this is probably why I ended up doing the work that I do. But I also think in life, I would always tend to think, oh, I have to create some big thing around this. But it doesn't have to be something formal. I don't have to create some vehicle for doing it. I can just have relationships. I can just be that person to other people who need it. And so that purpose feels really, really important, an important part of this journey.
Absolutely. And, again, I want to just reiterate, there are people listening that will already have been retired, maybe for a while. And what does purpose mean for you? And if you could bring it back to, what do you love to do? How can you find that in community? And simply share your story. Sharing your story empowers other people to live their story. And it's so different, Steph, I'm sure for you too, and you can comment on it, is like my mom's generation. And certainly her mom, like, they didn't talk about anything. And they just sat in silence and let their pain and their loneliness and all of that just eat away at them. My mom didn't really have friends. She didn't have a community. Now, I know some of my friends' parents do, and that's fantastic, but she didn't. And I know her mother didn't. They got so absorbed in the parenting role. And then when the children left, they didn't know what to do with their lives. And I think that again, coming back to what lights you up, makes you feel really good about yourself without comparing yourself to other people. What do you enjoy doing? How can you celebrate who you are? And yeah, get out there. There's a world waiting for you. And 50, 60 is just the beginning. We don't have to settle at this point in our lives, and we can be fully who we are, unapologetically, authentically. And I feel like that's the pathway.
That generation, I think this is important to understand too, is we learned a lot from that generation because that
Yeah.
generation, it was like your main goal is to get married and have children. And you see a lot of women in that generation who, when their kids moved out and became their own, whole humans, they were left in crisis because there was no longer anyone to need them.
Mhm.
There was no longer any requirement for them, and they didn't know themselves because women and that generation were never encouraged to be selves, right? Like they were always, and so a lot of those women got really, really desperate at that time that they became empty nesters and they became really, really conflicted.
Yeah.
I think what we've learned is that as women, we need to be whole selves and we need to know and understand ourselves as human beings. And even if that is new for you now, like that exercise of being able to understand and acknowledge and honor what you want, because we've been so used to doing what everyone else wants and what everyone else needs. And we're still that sort of bumper generation where we have one foot in the boomers and one foot in the millennials, and we're like sort of in between, kind of going, I have these old values that I was brought up in. I don't know that I believe them, but I also have this pressure to be something else, and I don't know where to go here. So it is an interesting time right now for the Gen X generation, and I know we have lots of, like, on either end of that sort of listening. But that exercise, like, I don't know if there are exercises that you can recommend that people actually can go to say, okay, where do I start this conversation with myself?
Yeah, for sure. You know, what you talked about there, I'll give some ideas in a moment, but what you talked about there were sort of the shoulds, right? Like we tend to live in shoulds. I should do this. I should dress this way. I should move my body this way. And I'm not saying in the positive way shoulds. Like when Steph and I go dancing, we are crazy. Okay, I'm going to own it. I am crazy. And people in their 20s and 30s will come up to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I want to dance like you." And I just say, "Do it." And they'll say, "Well, no, I don't want people to look at me. I don't want people to see me. I don't want to call attention to myself." I don't do this to call attention to myself. I do this because this is my expression of freedom. This is my expression of joy. And you know what? I friggin' earned it. Like I've lived a little bit more contained for part of my life. I've earned this. I've earned the right to feel my freedom, to recognize that my freedom is my power, and to reclaim my identity. And if it's expressed through dancing, if that's how I want to express it, if it's expressed through pickleball, if it's expressed through my meditation, through yoga, like it's all part of this beautiful package that I call Diana. And I really, really love her. And that's something that I think in the last 5 years has been a big part of my process, is getting really familiar with myself inside and out, appreciating all that I am, and recognizing the gifts that I have to share. So, what do we do? I think Steph and I both talked about, like, we have to get rid of the rules. And Mind Valley's founder, Vishen Lakhiani, calls them brules. And brules, BRULES, are bullshit rules. We've all been fed rules. And I feel like the older we are, the more rules we have to get rid of. It's like we don't need to hold on to that anymore. We don't need to have that belief. Challenge the thoughts that come through. Are they real? Do you really believe in them? Are they just something that was fed to you? And when we lose the rules, then we can dress how we want. We can move how we want. We can speak how we want. And we can let go of the guilt of not being some perfect model of what somebody else wanted to create. And I feel like that's a really important part of owning your worth, really owning who you are and living from a place of authenticity. I'll let you just add anything to that, Steph. And then I have some more suggestions that I'll put into a document, and we'll have it available in the show notes for this podcast.
Yeah, it's really about understanding that you're valuable as a whole human, no matter what you do or what you look like, who you are. I do a lot of coaching with business owners, and so much, like, I can give you all the tactics, I can give you all the strategies, but at the end of the day, it's what our brains are telling us that get us stuck, right? And so we do a lot of mindset work, we do a lot of, understanding beliefs, but what we always try to do is we try to get to a place where the idea is to not have the idea is not to not have limiting beliefs. The idea is to know what to do with them when they exist, when they arise, and be
Mm.
able to recognize and understand that this is our brain trying to keep us safe, right? Reclaiming old narratives, blah, blah, blah. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of like really intentional work that can be done around being able to examine and recognize what comes into our heads as either, a belief that's keeping us safe, but maybe we don't need it, or something that's truly aligned with our values, right? So that recognition is the first super important step to be able to get away from believing that everything that passes through our head is truth. When
We
we
don't
can
have
start
to
to
engage with every thought. I think that's what you're saying is you don't have to engage with every thought. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. You don't have to engage with every thought, and they don't all have to be true, but when we start to pull that back and examine kind of where they're coming from, it's always our brains trying to keep us safe. And like we interpret excitement the same way we interpret fear. And so we, can sometimes muddle all of that up. But doing that work, and I think like I was sort of trained up on all of Byron Katie's work, and it's the same kind of thing of like, is this true? Could I, without a doubt, and would other people say this is true? And then what would life be like if I didn't have this thought? And
Mhm.
then, you sort of just pull back the threads and kind of think about, well, I'm the one that's in control of all of this now. That's so empowering. And
Mhm.
moving into that phase where you're like, I can let this stuff go, right? Like it's always going to kind of arise, but when you build the tools to be able to manage it and recognize it and understand it and then leave it there,
Yeah.
man, that becomes really, really empowering, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then I'll take it one step further. If I look at the somatic embodiment spiritual work that I do, it's like, how does it feel? Like if you're doing something and it doesn't make you feel alive, and aliveness could be fear, because like Steph said, the body doesn't really know the difference between fear and excitement. It's the same chemicals getting flooded through the body, the same physiological responses. And the body also doesn't know the difference between a real and an imagined experience. So we can think ourselves into stress, tension, and illness, or we can think ourselves into freedom, joy, and aliveness. And we have a choice depending on what thought we want to put in it. And of course, we are built, our bodies, our brains, our nervous systems, particularly, are built for survival. So we always have to do that check in like, is this real? Or is this simply a rule? Is this simply a survival strategy that I no longer choose to hold on to? I think the other thing that's really important is to own your worth and to like make lists of the things that you've accomplished, of the times that you were brave, of the things that you thought you couldn't do and you did, and notice the language that you use. So because I'm a speech language pathologist and a spiritual life coach, a big part of what I do is around communication. What is the language that you're using in reference to yourself? So if you say, I am just this, or I'm kind of, or and use the you when you're referencing a personal experience. So, oh, when you go to the store and you're about waiting for that parking spot and you've got your blinker on and someone turns in. And I always say, no, I didn't have that experience. Own your experiences, own and speak from the I am. That is so empowering. And I am doesn't ever have to be justified. My former mother in law used to say, hey, it's just me. And I would say to her when she'd call, I'd say, there's no just about you. It's me. Own who you are. And little communication hacks can make a big difference.
Yeah, and so I think what we wanna do in this sort of segment of the show is talk about some real practical things that might get you on that journey to, gosh, we're still on a journey. Like, this is certainly not coming from this place of like, "Oh, we figured everything out," because God knows we haven't. But
Minutes.
can we bring some of this work that we've done and observations that we've made in this point in our life? And we'd also really welcome anyone else to share what's, been important for them. But like, let's go through some of these more practical kind of strategies that we can encourage people to start. Like for me, it's practicing the art of saying no. Like, what happens when you call me up and you say, let's go for a walk? And I am so tired and I just want to sit in my house and I don't have any reason. Of course, I want to spend time with you. But for me, my whole body is saying, just sit on the couch and do nothing. And I say, no, my like, I don't have an obliger tendency, but I would want to spend all the time I can with my friends, and so I would be saying yes to a walk when I really, it's a silly little thing, but it's just like I have the agency over my life now to honor exactly what I feel.
Yeah. And no is a complete sentence.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't ever have to explain your no. I love that. Yeah, me too. Just like, I think letting go of comparisons is really important too. I will never be 40 years old. I do not want to be 40 years old. I'm very content with who I am, how I am. I have to say, like, there's a lot of times I feel like I'm 40. When I'm out dancing, I feel 40, even younger. And it's just fun. So letting go of the comparisons and trying to be different than you are. And I have to say, Steph, as the single woman in her 60s, just starting dating, I'm aware that 55 to 65-year-old men are often looking for younger women, like in their 40s. And I'm like, you have that. That's for you. The right person for me is going to appreciate who I am and all that I am without my needing to bend or change or dim my light for them.
100%. And boy, have I ever learned that lesson in the last year and a half. And that was not a lesson that I ever had before, right? Once you experience it, you're like, oh, this can be the case. I think my next point is reinvesting in your body, right? Like all this stuff about fighting the signs of aging and blah, blah, blah. Fuck it. Like, this is my body and this is what it's doing. I do want to be healthy and strong and fit, and I am investing in that. That is what I am doing. But if my body doesn't look like I'm 20, it's never going to. That's okay, because what's really important to me is that I am healthy, strong, and fit. Yes. And yes, I am battling perimenopause and weight gain from perimenopause and all that shit. I can't do anything about that. But the levers that I can pull and the things I can invest in, your body is so important. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, I just kind of let it be the vessel that carried me through this very hectic life. And now we have this time and this energy to be able to say, well, I'm reinvesting in this. And I'm not reinvesting it so I can look 30. I'm reinvesting in it so I can, when I'm fit and healthy, no matter what I look like, I feel better. I feel more attractive. I feel, I can at the end of the day come back to my mind and just go, yeah, I feel good. And, this was a decision that I made as soon as I turned 50 too, is I used to have white blonde hair. I've had white blonde hair my whole adult life. I don't even know what my natural color is. And I decided that since I had all this white streak growing in, I was just going to go back to my natural color. And I had my hairstylist match my roots. And this is what it turned out to be. And, it was a lot darker than I expected. And it was so interesting to me that for about a week, like, I cried almost every day, and I was like, what have I done? I've lost myself. And then I was like, why is myself so tied up in what the color of my hair was? Like, it was so confronting, right? But now this is me. This is my hair. This is like how I look and what I am. And it just is, right? Does it mean that I don't look at myself every now and then and go, oh, I wish? Of course, right? Of course. But when we reinvest in our body, like, really good things happen.
Absolutely. And I will share something that my daughter's father, my first husband, said. We're friends. And he told her that he does 50 squats a day, not to get stronger today, but to be able to sit down and get up when he's 80. And I love that. And Steph, and some of my friends and listeners know that I went to Nepal as a service trip in March. And in Nepal, they squat low to go to the washroom and they sit on the floor. And I'm so grateful that my body has the mobility and the strength to be able to sit for those practices of going to the washroom, of eating on the floor, of playing on the floor. I want to be fit now so that when my daughter has kids, no pressure. But whenever she does, I mean, I work with kids. I can be on the floor playing with them and I'm comfortable on the floor. So much of my health and wellness routines now have very, very little to do with my external appearance now or even my strength now. It's about my strength in the future, knowing the markers of health and well-being as we get older. It's so important to do this now. And we'll get on conversations in future episodes. I would love to talk about the science of aging, not the science of anti-aging, but the science of aging, and aging with grace and aging with beauty and aging with strength. And we all have that capacity. And something I always tell my clients, nothing changes until something changes. So our hope is that we can help you change some of the mindsets, limiting beliefs, the conversations of, oh, I'm too old too, right? Those are frequent conversations. I'm too old too. And let us inspire you through our own lived experiences, through our life, through our conversations, through the research that we bring in here, so that you too can have a vibrant, healthy, joyful, freedom-filled Middle Ages.
Well, there's the mic drop. I got nothing else to add to that. Do we want to just go through a couple of like resources or books or things that we might bring to our audience that would be, great places to start?
Yeah, I love this idea because I'm really big on when we get, in order to make changes, in order to really come into the vibrancy and the aliveness of this stage of our lives, it is important to really focus on self-love, self-worth, understanding our role in this, on this planet. Like, what are we doing here? And so there's a few books that I love. You already mentioned Byron Katie, Getting the Love You Want, and that's a wonderful resource. One that I often recommend, well, first of all, my book, let me make a little plug here, The Call to Freedom. I don't even have one to show you. The Call to Freedom, Heal Your Pain, Awaken Your Loving Presence. It is a memoir, but it is written as in a coaching style where you have tons of spiritual life and somatic coaching practices. And people send me messages. The latest one I got was, this is a book I didn't know I needed, which I really, really deeply appreciate. There's also another book, The Mastery of Love. Have you heard of that one, Steph?
Yep.
Don Miguel Ruiz. So it's one of the first books that I've run many yoga teacher training programs, and I have a curriculum, and I've trained about 600 people to be yoga teachers. And that's a required reading before they start the program. And it really helps people to recognize that all these rules and all these conditionings and all the echo of all of our conditioning is not who we are. And how do we come back to the truth of who we are unapologetically when we take away everything else that we've been conditioned to believe? So those are three resources I really deeply appreciate. There's many more. There's The Untethered Soul. There's some books by Tara Brach. These are all sort of my spiritual go-to books. And they're really wonderful because they help the reader to recognize who we are, why we're here. And it doesn't have to do with the color of your hair, doesn't have to do with the shape of your body, but it does have to do with how alive you feel moment to moment as you navigate life.
So Diana's got you covered on all of the woo-woo, all the woo books. There's a few other ones that you might want to check out. Brooke Shields Is Not Allowed to Get Old. That was just sort of a memoir that, talks about all the double standards, the beauty myth, the liberation of midlife in the public eye. There's another one called The Chair Rocks, and it's a manifesto against ageism by Ashton Applewhite. And this is just sort of a call to action that reframes aging as strength and not decline. It's good for those kind of mindset shifts of midlife. Then there's another one called Red Hot Mamas, Coming Into Our Own at 50 by Colette Dowling. And that's an exploration of womanhood in midlife and identity and independence and passion and where we derive all of those from. So I've got you on the non-spiritual side. Diana's got some really great, reading for you on the spiritual side. And so hopefully some of those are, good inspiration for you to, fill your mind with new perspectives as you're embarking on this journey, or as you're well into this journey and still looking for, some new ways of thinking about all of it. Diana, what else you got for us? I know that we need to wrap up pretty quick, but this has been fun.
This has been fun, and this has been easy. And thank you for inspiring me to do this. What you may not know, Steph, is in about 2017, 18, I actually started a podcast, and it was a spiritual podcast, and I recorded a bunch of episodes, and I never published them. But I love podcasts. I think it's a great way to deliver information, to learn. I'm addicted to podcasts. I listen to them on all my walks. So I'm really happy and hoping that some people will get some really good wisdom from what we're sharing here. And I'd love to ask our listeners as well, if you have topic suggestions, things you want us to cover. Steph and I are really good at doing research. We're also really good at doing life. And so
we're good at having opinions.
And I think somewhere between those realms, like, we'll be able to fit in your topics. So Steph, how can people contact us if they want to share topic ideas?
So this is all streamed on all of our platforms. So if you're watching us on Facebook, if you're watching us on LinkedIn, if you're watching us on YouTube, leave your comments in the comments, I guess. Leave your questions and your thoughts in the comments. I would love this to be a dialogue, right? Like, we'll see all your comments coming in live. I think we have 3 people watching right now. Hey, comment and let us know that you're there. But, what questions do you have, or what are some of your thoughts? This can be a dialogue, and we want to engage with all the folks who are out there listening to us, because we got a lot to say, but we have a lot to learn as well.
And I know that both Steph and I really want to be relevant. So help us be relevant.
Hi, Rose. Oh, look, we had our first comment. Thank you, Stephanie. Oh, we're so happy that you were here. Thank you so much for joining us. And
Rose is a high school friend of mine.
No.
Yeah, so she's right alongside with us. It's so nice to hear from you, Rose. Thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. Thanks for being here. Okay, let's wrap this up, because I know that you have somewhere to go. We're going to try and be live every Friday at 1 o'clock Pacific. And we'll be diving into whatever comes next. We have to do some planning around that. But this was just such a great place for us to just, get into it and start. And I can't wait for our future conversations.
Me too. And I love you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Okay. I'll see you in an hour and a half.
Yes, I will. We're going to.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here.
For listening.
Thanks for listening to The Middle Ages. If you love this episode, follow the show, leave a review, and share it with someone who's rewriting the rules of midlife too. Because around here, we believe midlife isn't the end of anything. It's the start of everything. See you next time.